at her. She's absolutely drenched like a dog.
How could you do this?
What a pathetic sight.
Welcome to Reality Folktales TV. This channel is built on real human emotions, real choices, and real consequences. Our stories are thoughtfully created with the help of AI, guided by human values, insight, and intention. Please like, share, and subscribe. Let's go.
I stood there in the rain, 7 months pregnant, as my ex-husband Daniel looked at me with pure disgust and spat directly in my face. His mistress Linda threw her head back and laughed like it was the funniest thing she had ever seen, clapping her hands with delight. They didn't know that the man standing quietly behind me, holding an umbrella over my head, was someone who would change everything. They didn't know that 6 months ago, I had married the most powerful traditional ruler in 3 provinces, King Victor of the Ashland Kingdom. They didn't know that their entire world was about to crumble. They just kept laughing as the spit dripped down my cheek. It happened outside the hospital where I had gone for my prenatal checkup. Daniel and Linda were there for his routine medical appointment, and they wanted everyone to see how happy they were together. When Daniel saw me getting out of a simple taxi, he couldn't resist the opportunity to humiliate me one more time. He walked right up to me, looked at my pregnant belly with disgust, and said the words I will never forget. "Look at you, Rose, still pathetic after all these years. Found some desperate fool to put a baby in you." Then he spat in my face. Linda clapped her hands together and laughed so hard that people stopped to stare, pointing at me like I was nothing. I didn't cry. I had no more tears left for Daniel. I had cried rivers when he told me he was leaving me for Linda 3 years ago. I had cried oceans when he threw me out of our home with nothing but the clothes on my back. I had cried enough to fill the sea when he told everyone in our community that I was barren and worthless. But I had no tears left now because I had found something stronger than pain. I had found dignity. Before I could say anything, Victor stepped forward from behind me. He was dressed in a simple dark suit, no crown, no royal robes, nothing that would tell anyone who he was. He gently wiped the spit from my face with his handkerchief, his jaw tight with controlled anger. Daniel looked at him and sneered. "Who is this one? Your new boyfriend? Did you finally find someone desperate enough to take damaged goods?" Linda giggled again, holding onto Daniel's arm like she had won some great prize. "Daniel, leave them alone. Some women just have bad luck with men. Look at her, pregnant and still struggling to catch a taxi in the rain. Meanwhile, look at us, thriving and living our best life. We just came back from vacation in Dubai last week." If you're watching this story right now, I want you to pause for just 1 second and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your city. Are you watching this at midnight when you should be sleeping? Are you watching during your lunch break? Let me know because I love connecting with you all. And if this story is touching your heart already, please hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with someone who needs to hear a story about patience and divine justice. Your support means everything. Now let me continue. Victor spoke for the first time, his voice calm but carrying a weight that made even strangers turn to listen. "You should be careful how you treat people you think are beneath you. The world has a way of turning tables when you least expect it." Daniel laughed. "Oh, we have a philosopher here. Listen, old man, why don't you mind your business and take your charity case girlfriend somewhere else? Some of us have important hospital appointments. Unlike you two, we have actual money and status." What they didn't know was that this hospital, St. Mary's Medical Center, was built on land donated by Victor's family. What they didn't know was that the chief medical director of this hospital was Victor's childhood friend. What they didn't know was that every doctor and nurse in that building would recognize Victor's face the moment he stepped inside. But he didn't tell them any of this. He simply took my hand and led me toward the entrance. As we walked into the hospital, I felt Daniel's eyes on my back, still mocking, still cruel. The reception area was busy with patients and visitors, and we walked toward the elevator. That's when Dr. Philip emerged from his office, saw Victor, and his face lit up with surprise and joy. "Your Majesty," he said loudly, dropping into a respectful bow. We had no idea you would be visiting today. If we had known, we would have prepared properly." The entire reception area went silent. Every head turned. Daniel and Linda, who had just walked in behind us, froze in their tracks. Dr. Philip continued, oblivious to the tension. "How is Her Majesty doing? Is the pregnancy progressing well? We have the entire maternity wing ready for when it's time for the delivery. Should I call the specialist team to attend to her now?" Victor smiled gently. "No need for all that, Philip. We're just here for a routine checkup. Please treat my wife like any other patient. She doesn't like too much attention." I watched as the color drained from Daniel's face. Linda's mouth fell open so wide that she looked like a fish gasping for air. Other people in the waiting area began to whisper and pull out their phones. Within seconds, some had Googled Victor's name and were showing each other pictures of him in his full royal regalia, sitting on the ancient throne of Ashland. Daniel stumbled forward, his legs shaking. Your Majesty, but this is Rose, this is my ex-wife. There must be some mistake." Victor turned to look at Daniel with eyes so cold that I saw him physically step back. "There is no mistake. Rose is my wife, my queen, and the mother of my child. The only mistake here is that I allowed you to disrespect her without immediately teaching you the consequences." Linda grabbed Daniel's arm, her earlier confidence completely shattered. She looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. The crowd around us had grown larger, with people recording everything on their phones. Daniel's face went from pale to red, sweat forming on his forehead despite the air conditioning. Let me take you back to how all this began, 3 years before this moment, when my life was completely different. I was married to Daniel for 5 years. We met in college, fell in love like young people do, and got married right after graduation. For the first 2 years, everything seemed perfect. We both got good jobs, rented a nice apartment, and talked about our future children and the house we would build. I thought I had found my forever. Then everything changed when we started trying to have a baby. Month after month, year after year, nothing happened. We went to doctors, tried treatments, prayed at churches, but my belly remained flat. Daniel started to change. He became distant, cold, critical of everything I did. His mother began to visit more often, each time making pointed comments about how a real woman would have given her son children by now. I didn't know that Daniel had already started seeing Linda, his colleague from work. I didn't know that while I was going through painful fertility treatments, he was taking her on expensive dinners and weekend trips, buying her gifts with money we had saved for our future. I found out in the cruelest way possible. One evening, I came home early from work because I wasn't feeling well. I found them in our bed in our home, in the space where I had cried myself to sleep so many nights worrying about why I couldn't get pregnant. When I screamed, when I cried, when I begged Daniel to explain, he didn't apologize. Instead, he looked at me with pure contempt and said, "Linda is everything you could never be. She's beautiful, successful, and she doesn't have a broken body like you do." That night he threw me out, not just out of the house, but out of his life. Within a week, he had moved Linda in completely. Within a month, he had filed for divorce, claiming I had been unfaithful and had refused to seek medical help for our childlessness. He lied to everyone. His family supported him, telling our community that I had been a terrible wife who drove their son to find happiness elsewhere. They said I was lazy, that I had refused to cook or clean, that I had spent all his money. None of it was true, but people believed them because they told the story first and told it loudly. I lost everything: my marriage, my home, my reputation, my friends who believed Daniel's lies, and even my job because I couldn't focus anymore and my boss was Daniel's cousin. I moved back to my small village to live with my elderly grandmother in her tiny mud house with a leaking roof and no running water. I spent months in darkness, feeling like my life was over at 28 years old. My grandmother, Mama Grace, was a traditional storyteller. Every evening, despite my pain, she would make me sit with her by the fire and listen to old folktales. "These stories carry wisdom," she would say. They teach us that the darkest night comes just before dawn, that the tortoise who was mocked for being slow ended up winning the race, that the humble ant survived when the proud grasshopper perished. One story she told me repeatedly was about a young woman who was cast out by her husband for being barren. This woman wandered in the forest, crying and ready to end her life, when she met an old woman who gave her a simple calabash of water. "Drink this," the old woman said, "and remember that sometimes what seems like a curse is actually a blessing in disguise." The young woman drank the water, and though she didn't get pregnant immediately, she found peace. Years later, she discovered that her husband had been the infertile one all along, and she went on to marry a king and have many children. I thought these were just stories to make me feel better. I didn't know that my grandmother was preparing me for what was coming, that her stories were prophecies disguised as folktales. 6 months after my divorce was finalized, my grandmother told me that King Victor of Ashland would be visiting our village. He was known as a good ruler, a man who actually cared about his people, who built schools and hospitals, who settled disputes fairly, and who never flaunted his wealth or power. But he was also known as a widower. His first wife had died in childbirth 5 years earlier, along with their baby, and he had never remarried despite pressure from his council and family. The king visited our village to inaugurate a new water project he had funded. The entire village gathered in the square. I didn't want to go, but my grandmother insisted, saying it would be disrespectful to stay home. I went, wearing my simplest dress, standing at the back of the crowd, trying to be invisible. But Victor saw me. Later, he would tell me that in a crowd of hundreds of people, his eyes found mine and something shifted in his heart. He would say that he saw strength in my face, a kind of quiet resilience that spoke to him. That day, he asked the village chief about me, learned my story, and requested to speak with me privately. I was terrified. What could a king possibly want with me? When we met, he didn't talk about my failed marriage or my childlessness. Instead, he asked me about my dreams, my interests, what I would do if I could do anything in the world. We talked for hours. He told me about his own pain, losing his wife and child, feeling like a part of him had died with them. We connected over shared grief, over understanding what it meant to lose everything. Over the next 3 months, Victor visited my village frequently. We would take long walks talking about everything and nothing. He never made me feel less than him despite his position. He treated me like an equal, like someone whose thoughts and feelings mattered. He made me laugh again, something I thought I had forgotten how to do. He listened when I cried. He sat with me in silence when words weren't enough. When he proposed, I thought I was dreaming. "I'm not asking you to be my queen because I need someone to fill a position," he said, kneeling in my grandmother's small garden. "I'm asking because I have fallen in love with who you are. You've survived storms that would have destroyed others, and you're still here, still kind, still hopeful. That's royalty to me. That's what I want beside me for the rest of my life." We married quietly in a traditional ceremony with only close family present. Victor insisted on keeping it private because he wanted to give me time to heal, to adjust to my new life, to become comfortable with my new role without the pressure of public scrutiny and media attention. For 6 months, I lived in the palace, learning my duties, getting to know Victor's family and council, and slowly falling deeply in love with my husband in a way I had never loved before. Then, miraculously, I got pregnant. The doctors confirmed that there had never been anything wrong with me. Daniel had been the one with fertility issues all along, something he must have known but blamed on me anyway. The medical reports showed that Daniel had a condition that made conception extremely difficult, not impossible, but very unlikely. He had known this from a test he took years before we even met, but he had hidden it from me, letting me believe I was the broken one. The irony was almost poetic. The man who called me barren was actually the one who couldn't give life easily. Victor and I decided to keep my pregnancy private until after the first trimester. We didn't announce our marriage publicly either, wanting to enjoy our peace before the inevitable media attention. That's why I was still moving around the city in simple clothes, taking taxis, living a relatively normal life when I needed to. Victor wanted me to feel free, not caged by protocols and security details unless absolutely necessary. Which brings us back to that day at the hospital, to Daniel's spit dripping down my face, to Linda's cruel laughter echoing in my ears. Standing in that reception area, watching Daniel realize who I had become, I felt no joy in his humiliation. I felt sadness for who he had been and relief that I had escaped who he had become. Victor must have sensed this because he took my hand and started to lead me toward the elevator. But Daniel couldn't let it go. "Wait," he called out, his voice breaking with desperation. "Rose, please, I didn't know, I would never have, if I had known." I turned to face him, and for the first time in 3 years, I really looked at the man I had once loved. He looked smaller somehow, diminished, pathetic. Linda stood beside him, her earlier confidence completely destroyed, tears forming in her eyes as she realized the magnitude of what they had just done. "You wouldn't have what, Daniel?" I asked quietly, my voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside me. "You wouldn't have called me barren and worthless. You wouldn't have thrown me out with nothing. You wouldn't have lied about me to everyone we knew. You wouldn't have spat in my face 30 minutes ago while I'm 7 months pregnant. Which part wouldn't you have done if you had known I was now a queen?" He had no answer. What could he say? That he was sorry, that he had made a mistake, that he wished he could take it back. All of those words were meaningless because they weren't rooted in actual remorse. He was only sorry that I was no longer someone he could abuse without consequences. He was sorry he got caught, not sorry for what he had done. Linda stepped forward, falling to her knees in front of me, her expensive designer dress pooling on the hospital floor. "Please, Your Majesty," she sobbed, her makeup running down her face. "Please forgive us. We didn't know. Daniel told me you were a terrible wife, that you had refused to have children, that you were the reason the marriage failed. I didn't know the truth. Please, we have careers, reputations. Don't punish us." I looked down at her, this woman who had laughed as my ex-husband spat in my face, who had mocked my pregnancy and my struggle. "Get up," I said firmly. "Don't kneel to me. I'm not the one you've wronged the most. You've wronged yourselves. You've built your relationship on lies, betrayal, and cruelty. That foundation will crumble with or without any punishment from me. You don't need me to destroy you. You're already doing that to yourselves." Victor squeezed my hand gently, his eyes filled with pride and love. "We should go, my love. You need to rest, and our son needs his mother to be calm and peaceful." As we started to walk away again, Dr. Philip approached Daniel, his face stern and cold. "Mr. Daniel," he said in a voice that commanded attention, "I'm afraid I need to inform you that your appointment today has been canceled. In fact, after what I witnessed here, I think it would be best if you and your companion sought medical care at a different facility. We don't tolerate disrespect toward any of our patients, especially not toward Her Majesty the Queen. Security will escort you out." Daniel's face crumpled like paper. This hospital was the best in the region, with specialists he needed for a chronic condition he had been treating for years. Going elsewhere would mean starting over with new doctors, longer waiting times, and much higher costs that his insurance might not fully cover. But again, I felt no satisfaction in this. Revenge tastes bitter even when it's deserved. I turned to Dr. Philip. "That won't be necessary. Please continue to provide them with the care they need. Medical treatment shouldn't be denied because of personal conflicts. Everyone deserves access to good health care, regardless of their character or their mistakes." Dr. Philip looked surprised but nodded respectfully. "As you wish, Your Majesty. Your compassion is truly remarkable." Victor and I went upstairs for my checkup. The specialist confirmed that our baby was healthy and growing perfectly. As I lay on the examination table, listening to my baby's strong heartbeat filling the room, I cried. But these weren't tears of pain or sadness. They were tears of gratitude, of wonder at how life had turned around so completely, of joy that I had survived long enough to see this miracle. Later that evening, as Victor and I sat in our private quarters at the palace, surrounded by the comfort and beauty of our home, he asked me, Why did you let them continue treatment at the hospital? After what they did to you, after he spat in your face?" I thought about it for a long moment, watching the sunset through our window, because carrying hate and seeking revenge would make me like them. My grandmother used to tell me a story about a farmer who caught a snake that had bitten his son. The farmer wanted to kill the snake slowly, make it suffer. But a wise elder told him, "If you torture the snake, you become as venomous as it is. Kill it quickly if you must, or let it go, but don't let it poison your heart." I chose to let it go. Their punishment is living with who they are, knowing what they did, watching my happiness from a distance. That's enough. Victor pulled me close, his hand resting protectively on my belly. "You're wiser than most people I know. You're going to be an incredible mother, and you're already an incredible queen." Over the next few weeks, news of the hospital incident spread throughout the kingdom and beyond like wildfire. Social media exploded with the story. Videos from multiple angles showed Daniel spitting in my face, showed Linda laughing, showed the moment they realized who I was. People who had believed Daniel's lies about me 3 years ago now knew the truth. His reputation was destroyed, not by anything I did, but by his own actions caught on dozens of phones and shared millions of times. Daniel lost his job because the company he worked for didn't want to be associated with someone who had publicly abused a queen. Major clients pulled their contracts, citing moral concerns. Linda was fired from her position for the same reason, her social media influencer career crashing as sponsors dropped her one by one. Their relationship, built on betrayal and superiority, began to crack under the pressure of public scrutiny and financial stress. But I didn't celebrate their downfall. Instead, I focused on my own life, my own healing, my own future with Victor and our coming child. 3 months later, I gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. We named him Joshua, which means God is salvation, because that's exactly what my story had been about. Salvation from a toxic relationship. Salvation from lies and abuse. Salvation into a life filled with real love and dignity and purpose. My grandmother was there for the birth, holding my hand just as she had held my heart during my darkest days. "You see," she whispered as I held Joshua for the first time, his tiny fingers wrapped around mine, "the folktales were true. The woman who was called barren became a mother. The woman who was thrown away became a queen. The woman who was spat upon now wears a crown. This is how the ancestors teach us to hope, to wait, to believe." I later learned that Daniel tried to reach out to me several times through various intermediaries, asking for forgiveness, claiming he had learned his lesson, saying he was a changed man desperate for a second chance. Each time I sent the same message back. "I forgive you for my own peace, not for your comfort. Forgiveness doesn't mean relationship or reconciliation. I wish you well, but from a distance. Build your own life, find your own redemption, but do it far away from me and my family." Victor and I decided to use our story to help others. We established a foundation for women who had suffered abuse, abandonment, or injustice in their marriages and relationships. We provided legal aid, counseling, job training, and temporary housing. We wanted to turn our pain into purpose, our testimony into help for others walking the same dark roads we had walked. One day, about a year after Joshua was born, I was at one of our foundation centers when a young woman came in. She was thin, bruised, clearly at the end of her rope. She reminded me so much of who I had been, sitting in that mud house, believing my life was over. I sat with her, listened to her story of a husband who beat her and blamed her for everything wrong in his life, and I held her as she cried tears I recognized from my own past. "Do you think there's any hope for me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Do you think life can get better, or is this all I deserve?" I looked into her eyes and shared my story. Not to boast, not to show off what I had gained, but to give her hope that darkness doesn't last forever. 3 years ago, I told her, my ex-husband spat in my face while I was pregnant and his mistress laughed like it was entertainment. Today, I'm a queen, a mother, and a survivor. If my life can change that completely, so can yours. But first, you have to survive. You have to choose life even when it's hard. You have to believe that you're worth more than how someone else treats you. She eventually left her abusive marriage, went through our foundation's program, and last I heard, she had started her own small business selling handmade crafts and was rebuilding her life piece by piece. That's the real victory, not the crown on my head, but the crowns I can help place on other women's heads, the crowns of dignity, self-worth, and hope. My story spread far beyond our kingdom. International media picked it up. I was invited to speak at conferences about domestic abuse, resilience, and women's empowerment. But I always kept my message simple and rooted in the wisdom my grandmother had taught me through those folktales. I would tell them, in African folklore, there's always a lesson wrapped in story. The tortoise who was mocked for being slow teaches us that steady persistence wins the race. The ant who was overlooked teaches us that small doesn't mean weak. The woman who was abandoned teaches us that your value isn't determined by those who fail to see it. These aren't just cute stories for children. They're survival guides passed down through generations of people who understood that life is full of suffering, but also full of possibility and transformation. Now, as I watch Joshua playing in the palace gardens, chasing butterflies and laughing with pure joy, I think about what I would tell my younger self, the one who lay crying in that mud house, convinced her life was over at 28. I would tell her, don't lose hope, even when hope seems foolish. The people who betrayed you don't get to write the end of your story. The people who spat on you don't get to define your worth. The people who laughed at your pain don't get to steal your joy or your future. I would tell her, sometimes the closed door is a blessing you can't see yet. If Daniel hadn't left me, I would never have met Victor. If I hadn't been broken down completely, I wouldn't have been built back up stronger and wiser. If I hadn't lost everything, I wouldn't have discovered what I was truly made of, what I was truly capable of surviving. I would tell her, revenge will never satisfy you like peace will. Justice doesn't always look like punishment. Sometimes justice looks like you walking away with your head high, building a better life, and letting karma handle the rest while you focus on your own happiness. I would tell her, you are not defined by your worst day, your failed marriage, your empty womb, your tears in the darkness, the spit on your face. You are defined by your courage to keep going, your choice to remain kind despite cruelty, your faith that tomorrow can be different from today, your refusal to become bitter like those who hurt you. The moral lessons from my story are simple but powerful, timeless truths that apply to every generation. First, treat everyone with respect because you never know who they might become or who they already are beneath the surface. Daniel treated me like garbage when he thought I was worthless, and it destroyed him when he realized his mistake. If he had treated me with basic human dignity during our divorce, even if the marriage couldn't be saved, he wouldn't have lost everything. Pride and cruelty always have consequences, sometimes immediate, sometimes delayed, but always inevitable. Second, your value doesn't change based on other people's ability to see it. I was valuable when Daniel called me worthless. I was fertile when he called me barren. I was worthy of love when he said I was unlovable. The truth about who you are exists independently of anyone else's lies or limitations or blindness. Third, patience and faith will carry you through darkness when nothing else can. I didn't know that my life would change so dramatically. I couldn't see the future when I was crying in my grandmother's mud house. But I kept going, one day at a time, one breath at a time, and that persistence led me to better days. Don't give up during the storm. The sun is still there, just hidden behind clouds. Fourth, let karma do its work instead of exhausting yourself trying to get revenge. I didn't have to destroy Daniel and Linda. Their own choices did that. When you build a relationship on betrayal and lies and cruelty, it will collapse because the foundation is rotten. I didn't need revenge because the universe has its own justice system, its own way of balancing the scales. Fifth, use your pain to help others heal. The worst thing that can happen is to suffer and learn nothing from it, to survive but remain bitter and closed off from the world. Transform your trauma into testimony, your mess into a message, your test into a teaching moment. That's how you find meaning in suffering, by turning it into service. And finally, remember that folktales and old wisdom exist for a reason beyond entertainment. My grandmother's stories weren't just ways to pass time. They were survival guides disguised as tales, maps through the darkness disguised as entertainment. They taught me resilience, hope, patience, and faith. They connected me to generations of women who had suffered and survived before me. Honor the wisdom of those who came before you, the ancestors who walked roads even harder than yours. Today, as Queen of Ashland, I live a life I never could have imagined during those dark months in the mud house. But more importantly, I live a life I never could have appreciated if I hadn't first lost everything. The palace is beautiful, but it's more beautiful because I know what it's like to live in a mud house with a leaking roof. My husband's love is precious, but it's more precious because I know what it's like to be hated by someone who promised to love me forever. My son's laughter is music, but it's sweeter music because I know what it's like to be called barren and broken. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if Daniel hadn't left me, if he had stayed, and we had somehow worked things out despite everything. The truth is, I would probably still be in that toxic relationship, still being blamed for his inadequacies, still trying to earn love from someone incapable of giving it, still shrinking myself to fit into his small vision of who I should be. His betrayal, as painful as it was, set me free to find real love, real respect, real partnership with someone who saw my value. As for Daniel, I heard through mutual acquaintances that he and Linda eventually broke up after 2 years of constant fighting and mutual blame. He remarried someone else and they struggled to conceive, confirming what the medical reports had shown all along. I genuinely hope he learned from his mistakes and treats his new wife better than he treated me. I don't wish him harm. I don't wish him suffering. I simply wish him a life far away from mine, a life where he finds whatever peace he can. Linda, I heard, went back to her hometown, working a regular office job after her influencer career crashed completely. Part of me felt sympathy for her because she had been lied to as well, manipulated by Daniel into believing I was the villain in a story where I was actually the victim. But sympathy doesn't erase accountability. She chose to laugh when a pregnant woman's face was spat on. She chose cruelty when she could have chosen compassion or at least silence. We all make choices, and we all live with the consequences. The last time I saw my grandmother before she passed away peacefully in her sleep, she held my hands with her weathered fingers and said, "I always knew you were destined for greatness. Not because of the crown you would wear, but because of the character you would build through fire. You took your breaking and let it make you better, not bitter. That's the real royalty, granddaughter. That's the real crown that no one can ever take from you." I think about her words every single day. I think about them when I'm helping other women through our foundation. I think about them when I'm teaching Joshua about kindness and respect and treating every person with dignity. I think about them when I'm making decisions as queen, trying to rule with both wisdom and compassion, remembering where I came from. So if you're watching this story and you're going through your own darkness right now, if someone has betrayed you, abandoned you, spat on you literally or figuratively, humiliated you publicly or privately, I want you to hear this clearly. This is not the end of your story. This is not where you will remain forever. The chapter you're in right now is painful, maybe unbearable, but it's not the final chapter. You are stronger than you know right now. You are more valuable than anyone who devalues you realizes. You are carrying seeds of greatness inside you that will sprout when the season is right, when the soil of your life is ready. Don't let temporary pain convince you of permanent defeat. Keep going even when you're crawling. Keep believing even when belief seems stupid. Keep hopping even when hope hurts. Keep surviving even when survival is all you can manage. And one day, you'll look back at this moment and realize that what broke you actually broke you open, allowing light to pour into places that had been dark for too long. Your ex-husband who spat on you, your ex-wife who betrayed you, your friend who abandoned you, your family who rejected you, they don't get to write your ending. You do. And you can choose to write an ending so beautiful, so powerful, so redemptive that it inspires others to keep fighting for their own happy endings. Remember, the woman who had spit dripping down her face became a queen. If it happened for me, it can happen for you. Maybe not a literal crown, but a crown of dignity, respect, love, and purpose. That's the crown that really matters, the one that shines even in darkness. And before I end this story, I have one more thing to ask you. If this story touched your heart, if it gave you hope, if it made you feel something deep in your soul, please don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story of hope and resilience and transformation. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today, someone who's going through their own storm and needs a reminder that better days are coming, that survival is possible, that redemption is real. Comment below and tell me what part of the story resonated with you the most. Did you connect with the pain of betrayal, the journey of healing, the power of patience, the choice of forgiveness? Let me know, because your stories and your comments inspire me to keep sharing these messages. And if you're the person going through hell right now, comment, "I will survive," below. Let it be your declaration, your promise to yourself, your commitment to keep going no matter what. I read every single comment, and I want to encourage you personally, to remind you that you're not alone. Thank you for watching this story until the very end. Thank you for allowing me to share this journey with you, for giving me your time and attention. Remember, you are loved, you are valuable, and your story isn't over yet. The best chapters might still be unwritten, waiting for you to live them. Keep turning the pages, keep living, keep hopping, keep believing. Your crown is coming, and no one can stop it from reaching your head.
Thank you so much for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. May your day be blessed